Just before we get going with the show, I can proudly say that Purple Patch is not like most other coaching companies. Our focus is high performance. But what does that mean? Well, what it means is that you will achieve your sporting goals, but at the same time, you're going to improve your health and show up in all other aspects of your life better. You see, we're deadly serious about performance while we like to have a lot of fun doing it. And part of our mission is to empower you to thrive. So how do we do this? Well, first, we have a proven methodology, one that stood the test of time. It's driven some of the world's best professional endurance athletes to IRONMAN titles and world championships, as well as countless first-time finishers for amateurs across Ironman and half Ironman events. We've qualified more than 1,500 athletes to world championship events over our time. We take a team approach to coaching to ensure that each athlete, including you, has access to not just myself, but also a group of experts and coaches that can drive and fuel your performance. We amplify remote coaching via real coaching. Yes, that's via video, so that no matter where you live, you can gain expertise and real-time feedback. Those sessions are all on demand as well as live, so you can get two-way video with myself and the other Purple Patch coaches. And we have huge ongoing education and practical guidance to ensure that you become smarter, not just faster across all aspects of sport. Ultimately, finally, we have one of the largest and most engaged and supportive communities to ensure that you get great accountability and a healthy dose of fun along the journey. In other words, why are we not doing this? Our coaching is special. And so reach out to learn more. Either one-to-one coaching options or our hugely popular Tri-Squad program. It is human coaching at your best. If you want to have a complimentary consultation to learn more, ping us info@purplepatchfitness.com. All right, we look forward to welcoming you to the team, and we also look forward to part 3 in our triathlon series, Winning at Triathlon 2025. Here's the show. I'm Matt Dixon, and welcome to the Purple Patch Podcast. The mission of Purple Patch is to empower and educate every human being to reach their athletic potential. Through the lens of athletic potential, you reach your human potential. The purpose of this podcast is to help time-starved people everywhere integrate sport into life. And welcome back to the Purple Patch Podcast. This is part 3 of our 4-part January series, Winning in Triathlon 2025. Let's kick off today's show with a little bit of a quick recap of what we've done so far this year, 2025. Goodness me. Well, it all kicked off on January 2nd, where we laid the foundation of our education. We introduced the Purple Patch coaching model, and we also highlighted setting the proper perspective that's going to serve as the backbone for your performance gains over the course of this year. And then we got into the meat of it all. The next week, we went through part 1, which was really anchored around vision, goal setting, and commitments. In that, we explored a really important case study, an athlete called Sam, if you might remember it. And that was helping us understand how we could apply the lessons from that case study to not just set your vision and your goals, but also create actionable steps to create a clear path for yourself. And a big part of that, if you'll remember, is what will you focus on? And as importantly, what will you not focus on so you can drive the performance needle? And that encompasses all levels of athletes. It was a really important fundamental show. Last week, we did part 2 of our series, and that was all about consistency, focusing on structured training blocks, as well as integrating a high degree of flex to ensure that your training aligns with life demands, really important, so we get integration, not just dumping training on top of life, and building the absolute cornerstone of your success, which is the magic word consistency. So here we are this week. What are we going to focus on this week? We're going to talk about the journey. If you want to have a great 2025, a breakthrough, if you want to up-level, no matter how strong your vision and your set of goals are, no matter how well you set up your plan, it's a dirty truth of any endeavor that you're going to face setbacks and obstacles. And you're going to need to emerge through these if you're going to be successful. Your success ultimately depends on your ability to adapt. Adaptability is a huge component and cornerstone of any success in any endeavor. And you're going to need to navigate these inevitable challenges that you're going to come up against In other words, even if you've got the very best team around you and you spend all the time in the world to set the path, there's going to be things that you don't anticipate. And so we're going to go through today 5 core principles that can help you remain highly flexible and resilient, ensuring that you stay on track to achieve your goals that you've set up. And you did that in part 1 of our series, no matter what happens. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the journey. One of my favorite sayings at Purple Patch, we have many silly and very fun sayings, but one of my favorite sayings that has true meaning is embrace the journey. And that journey, no matter how committed you are, no matter how ambitious you are, it's going to include a whole bunch of setbacks. It's never going to be linear. Performance progression is not linear. And so today, I want to equip you by the end of the education with a set of tools and a framework for you to operate on. Now, once again, we're going to come back to some case studies. I'm going to draw some lessons and experience of some athletes that I've coached, including some of the Purple Patch pros. But I want to ensure that each of the principles we go through, we keep it as simple as we can, but also as actionable as we can. And so with that, let's do it. It's going to be, ladies and gentlemen, once again, part 3, the journey, and it is the meat and potatoes. Yes, folks, the meat and potatoes. And right before I dig in, I should note here, we go through a lot of education. And you might listen or watch today if you're viewing it on YouTube, and you might think, I need a little bit of personal help here. I need a little bit of guidance. And so, yes, we are absolutely available to enable you to join the team at Purple Patch via coaching or Tri Squad. All you need to do is reach out to info@Purple Patch Fitness. We can have that discussion. But if you're self-coached or you feel like you need a little additional support and you don't feel like Purple Patch coaching is for you, that's great. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to do a paid consultation with you. We love to support athletes' journeys. You don't need to be a Purple Patch athlete to take a part in our journey and leverage our expertise. Email the same address, info@purplepatchfitness.com. Reach out, just let them know that you want to have a consultation with a Purple Patch coach, and you can also do that with me if you would like, and we're happy to set up some of the components that we talk about, not just in today's show, but any one of the shows of this part of the series. So that's a consultation that's available for you. We want to ensure that you're successful Purple Patch coach athlete or not. So with that, let's dig into the details of a little bit of today's show. And we're going to try and infuse Stuart, who's an athlete of mine that I've coached again, Stuart, a Purple Patch athlete. We're going to try and integrate some of the lessons of him as a case study into this series that we're going through here. So Stuart, Purple Patch athlete, began his season with pretty ambitious goals. He wanted to podium in his age group. He also wanted to complete his first Ironman. So he sort of had almost 2 parallel goals. In the 70.3 or the half Ironman distance, which he'd had a couple of seasons of background in, he wanted to move up to that podium level. So he was pretty ambitious on that. At the same time, he wanted to complete his first Ironman race. He'd never done that. So he didn't have podium ambitions there. We sort of nipped that in the bud straight away. He just wanted a magical experience. His plan was tight. It was highly structured, and it was really aligned with life demands. And so he was actually sitting pretty at the start of the year. He had training experience. He kind of had his performance recipe dialed in. And this is how we love it. The goals were not out of this world crazy. They were really quite accessible. We certainly knew that he had capacity and certainly the physiological background to go and be really successful in a first Ironman event. And he also, with some commitment and consistency, we felt like he could up-level to a half Ironman podium and perhaps a series of podiums throughout the year. So at the start of the year, he was sitting pretty. It was fantastic. But as so often happens, life threw a few curveballs at him. Number one, a really demanding work project. And that was really derailing for him. He had massive implication of responsibilities in one of the core quadrants of his life. He has his family, he has his work, and of course he has his training and preparation for events. And in the area of work, boom, It was a huge work project, and it absolutely derailed a core part of his training block. A second component is he had family illness. He had one of his close relatives had family illness. That included a whole bunch of logistical challenges as well as a host of unplanned travel. So that was another cause of life stresses. And I know plenty of athletes that have gone through very, very similar scenarios with that. And more than that, perhaps related, but certainly indirectly, he had a nagging calf strain, and that emerged halfway through the year. So here we are, unanticipated. We have curveballs being thrown at Stuart. Life, family side, work, boom, big work project. Training interrupted because of a niggling calf strain. And so how did Stuart navigate this season? And ultimately, was he ultimately able to be successful? And I'll give you the teaser here. Of course he was, because I'm using him as a case study. But I've reflected on Stuart's journey, and what I pulled out was really 5 principles that I want to discuss today. So as we're going to go through, we're going to keep coming back to Stuart and how we navigated it and then make it applicable for you. I also want to pull in a couple of examples that I've talked about before on the show relative to either athletes I've coached or, of course, some of the Purple Patch pros, because I think they're nice and inspirational and also packed of lots of lessons for us. So leveraging Stuart's case study, here are 5 principles of navigating the journey. I think it's a wonderful case study to leverage all the way through. The first principle, it can be wrapped up into a simple title, and that is results-driven, but process and behavior focused. This is really important. I'm sure when you start 2025, you're ambitious, you want to up-level, you want to smash your goals. And make no mistake about it, results matter. Ultimately, results matter. When I was coaching the Purple Patch pros, I was highly ambitious. Look, I started off with a simple quest. I want to coach world champions. That was my ambition. And almost every Purple Patch pro that joined our team was equally ambitious. They didn't come just hoping to improve. They wanted to win races. That was the ambition. That's why they're doing it. It's not an easy journey. Yet, with that, we were results driven. But our focus was on process and behavior. And that's because we understand, as most high performers do, that real progress, sustainable progress, and sustainable high performance always stems from consistent behaviors and a commitment to the process. And so if we come back to the case study of Stuart, we can apply that into our lessons here. Because Stuart was incredibly brave and really smart. He had huge amplification of stresses in work. He had unanticipated family illness that caused logistical challenge, a whole bunch of travel, as well as emotional stress. And also on top of that, he had some physiological challenges with muscle niggles. And so he very quickly shifted his focus. Now, he had a good team around him, but very quickly shifted his focus. And he went from trying to chase his regular recipe of weekly hours. He always saw himself, he identified himself with, if I can lock in at 12 hours a week, I'm going to be successful. Instead of thinking about chasing outcomes of that, I need to accumulate a preset amount of hours. He did a remarkably good job of shifting to daily actions. Now that's a Stuartism right there. This is what he said. He said, I'm going to focus on daily actions. So what was that? Well, when he had incredibly chaotic weeks, he tried to complete really short sessions. So rather than doing utopian sessions, he did something, incremental progress. And the key part of that was a lesson that I've learned over the course of coaching athletes across the spectrum of abilities, which is sometimes progression is just not moving backwards. So you might have a predetermined vision of what great success is, but when life throws curveballs, or sometimes even when you need to go on family vacations throughout the year, progression can just be not sliding backwards. And that breaks the mold of this continual linear progression of layering and layering. That magic word consistency is key here. Consistency doesn't mean consistently hitting 10 or 12 or 14 or 30 hours a week, whatever it is. It's about self-managing and ensuring that you consistently can do the right thing at the right time in context of life demands. And Stuart did an incredibly good job of this. He completely removed outcomes so far as total number of mileage, total number of weekly hours as a barometer of success. Instead, what he did throughout the whole of his season was focus on daily actions. What is the best thing that I can do for myself right now in the context of having to travel to go and see the relative, in terms of work when life got really demanding, and ensuring that I can layer on consistency. And this was an incredibly important component. His mindset here, his approach, actually really reminds me of Sarah Piampiano, one of the most successful purple patch professional athletes that I ever coached. And I talked a lot about her in many of the episodes here. But Sarah became, despite, I would say, relative to the thin air of world-class performance, a lower physical gifts of ability. So she actually had less talent than many of her peers and athletes. She became one of the most successful US Ironman female athletes ever. But she built her success on really focusing on small daily habits. She focused on layering consistency. And she really dialed in her nutrition, her recovery, rather than chasing immediate race outcomes. She took the long-term approach. And yes, she was tough. She was committed. She was resilient. But she really had a mastering of this process over outcomes result. So what does that mean for you? If you think about focusing on behaviors, focusing on process, not worrying about outcomes too much. Yes, results matter, but that's not where your mind is. Here's the key. As you take on this journey that is going to be full of unanticipated setbacks and challenges and obstacles, etc., focus a little bit like our case study, Stuart, on what are your daily actions. Anchor yourself in process. And what that means is every day is, how can I get better today? How can I improve? What is my win that I can achieve today? And if you do that on a day-to-day basis, it enables you to put it within context of everything else in life. So don't start with what do I have to do today, but what can I do to win? If you do that in 2025, it's going to enable you to make better real-time decisions within context of life. And this is critical, not just for professional athletes, but I would almost amplify in importance for time-starved athletes like yourself. What is my win today? That is your action. And it's not just checking a box of a big workout. It's about doing the right thing in the context of life to ensure that you can weave consistency over many, many weeks and many, many months. Principle number 1, results-driven, process and behavior focused. Super. What about principle number 2? This is one that always catches people's eye and attention. Keep things simple. Look, the simple truth is that complexity breeds overwhelm. Simplicity fosters clarity and action. When I'm asked about the success of the purple patch professional athletes, one of the things I always talk about is the great surprise. Because people always want to understand and learn about the key workouts or the complexity that we add. What do we add in? What do they do that's so different? And the answer to that is really quite surprising. Great success typically stemmed from what we removed from an athlete's journey rather than what we added. In other words, the practices and the habits and the strategies of a highly successful professional athlete are wrapped around really mundane repetition. Their lives are almost monk life. They focus on the things that are going to drive the performance needle. They master those things and they repeat them day after day, week after week. We tend to strip it down. In fact, one of the primary sayings at Purple Patch was nail the basics. When I developed the Purple Patch Pro Squad, where we took an individual sport with a host of individual athletes that were at different stages of development and competitive with each other, we built a team out of it. And one of the most core or central components of that team of professional athletes was to define a set of simple, non-negotiable behaviors. For us, those were the nail the basics. And there were 7. Now, I won't go through all 7 right now, but it's really, really simple what they were. Things like we will always consume calories after every single training session. We will always go very easy in the easier workouts. We will prioritize sleep, trying to embed as much as we can, consistent 8 to 9 hours every night, and do everything we can to maximize the quality of sleep. We will have a bolstering of our immune system recovery and adaptations by mastering daily hydration. We will integrate strength throughout the year. So these are some really simple universal practices and habits. But you know what we did? We mastered them. We ingrained them as a universal practice. And we tried to keep it as simple and repeatable as possible. And that's why this is our second principle. Keep things simple. Let's go back to our case study that we're weaving through today's show. Stuart, what he did was he simplified his weekly focus. He had so much going on. He had that big work project we talked about. He had travel and the whole cognitive load of family illness. He couldn't overcomplicate life. In fact, we stripped things away and we focused on 3 core things. Number 1, I want you to dial in strength. I felt like with him going on to an IRONMAN distance that we really need to ensure that he had his durability there. So we focused on strength training. Don't let that go. Number 2, we had a focus on higher intensity training because I wanted him to ensure that he could dial that in. We took the opportunity to build endurance when we could, but because his total training was going lower, we amplified a focus on higher intensity. We had to optimize with less training hours than he otherwise would have. And the third area is we committed to recovery. Look, I'm the recovery coach, so that's no surprise at all. But those were 3 core principles. Boost up higher intensity, maximize recovery and downtime, and ensuring that he had the backbone of good durability and strength. Really, really important. And we stripped away all of the unnecessary layers, and it really enabled him to keep consistency. Because in any given week, he said, okay, where am I going to nail my strength sessions? Where am I going to hit my 1 to 2 high intensity sessions? And everything else was living and breathing. If we had more time and capacity, because maybe he didn't have such of a load of travel with the family illness, or maybe the work project gave him a little bit more breathing room, we would take advantage. We would boost up the endurance that he could do. But when things got a little heated, for one reason or another, and he had less time, we would reduce the endurance and just say, you know what, that can come next week or the week following. That was really a really good example. A prime Purple Patch Pro example of this is the most famous one that we probably have, Tim Reed. You might have heard me talk about this. Tim, he became world champion at the 70.3 distance. And the big story with him was over the course of that year, 2016, he tended to be an athlete that could overcomplicate things. My loving, affectionate nickname for him was Tim the Tinkerer. But in that year, we absolutely diffused many things that he would typically focus on. And we built all of the emphasis around the core principles. Those nail the basics. And that's all we did. And what happened there is it tended to simplify. It created clarity of focus and empowered him to really master the fundamentals. One of those fundamentals was an emphasis for Tim on terrain management. and it yielded better speed return on his bike, and it gave him a toolkit that he could leverage, and he did leverage at the World Championships. And I think that was the biggest catalyst for his great success that year. Really, really simple, really important. So what does that mean for you as you go into 2025? Well, it stems from some of the stuff that we talked about in part 2 of our episode in this 4-part series, which is simplify your training. What I would encourage you to do is to identify your top 2 or 3 things that you're going to focus on every single week and dive into those. Now, it's not just training. It might be across your swim, bike, run, and strength, but it might also be a habit. But what are the 2 or 3 things that you're going to obsess on that are going to yield the biggest performance gains? One of the sayings that I like to leverage at Purple Patch is master the boulders and focus on the boulders and let the sand filter away. It's easy, it's appealing to try and focus on everything, but we as human beings just can't do that. And so if you want to be successful and you want to be equipped to navigate obstacles and challenges, you better filter out and keep things simple. Principle number 2. Here's principle number 3. Respond, don't react. This is it. This is a key component here. When we have flex in the system, no matter how much we care about planning and prioritization, we are going to be met with obstacles and challenges. And so I encourage you, respond, don't react. You see, the truth is how you handle these disruptions is going to absolutely define your path forward. And so when you do have a pitfall, a huge work project, a family illness, an injury, whatever it might be, don't react. You don't need to throw the toys out of the cot. Instead, respond. What's the difference here? I believe a response is a proactive mindset. It's a scenario in which you pause, you assess, and then you act purposefully. That's what response is. And in an athletic mindset, what that means is that there's lots of Purple Patch sayings today, folks, you control the controllables. In other words, what can you influence? What can you actually focus on that you will yield a proactive, positive result no matter what is happening? And when you do this, you want to come back to your commitments, and then you adapt the plan with purpose. So if you remember the Purple Patch coaching model, phase 1 was defining purpose and vision, what success looks like. And out of that, we establish goals. We then, in phase 2, talk about our commitments and what our priorities are. What are we going to focus on and what are we not? Now as you're doing the doing, week to week, nailing down the training, navigating life, you might stray off track. You might be set with a huge challenge or obstacle. And if you want to respond to that, the only way to do it is to pause, come up out of the weeds. So in other words, get out of the emotion of it, come up and come back to those commitments. All right, what am I looking to achieve here? Where am I going? And where did I agree and commit to place my emphasis and my energy? Okay, with that in mind, this is where I'm at right now. What can I control? What can I focus on? And how do I adapt my plan? Because your training plan or your global plan more broadly may not be applicable with this new information, and that's all it is, this new information and scenario that you're faced with. And so we need to adapt. Adaptability is a huge component. And I, like athletes and as a coach, like to return to the commitments and adapt it with purpose. So this is something that's really simple, and we can draw on Stuart. Let's talk about his calf injury. So this wasn't a calf tear. It was more of a niggle. And the truth is that the origin of this tight calf probably emerged from multiple sources. I think there was a mechanical component, a little bit of a lack of ankle mobility. There was also a stress component quite often the body displays the accumulation of stresses when it happens across life, and I think there was a component of that as well. I also even think there was a little bit of a shoe choice. But in many ways, this sort of multi-area contribution to these tight calves, we want to address those piece by piece. But ultimately, we want to keep Stuart moving and progressing towards his journey, trying to get to the podium, trying to ensure that he has a successful completion of Ironman. And he is met with tight calves. The symptoms are there. So what's the very worst thing that I could do as a coach to Stuart? Keep prescribing normal running training, because it's only going to go down the cul-de-sac of failure. He's going to get muscle fatigue and greater injury risk. He's going to be set back and sidelines. He's not going to achieve his goals. So we need to not react, oh my goodness me, he's got a calf strain, but respond. Pause, come out of the level. Let's think about it. The commitment was a really heavy focus on running, but we need to adapt. And so we shifted out. We did a couple of things. We started to transition to doing some more hill-based strength, because ironically with Stuart, he could do that on the treadmill without any cause of pain and any extra tightness occurring. So that was step one. Step two, we introduced a few other modalities to help him navigate while it was tight. So that included some rowing, and we actually had an added emphasis on swimming. And then we got about trying to fix the root cause. So we shifted the shoes that he was walking around in the day. He was walking around in running shoes all day. That wasn't actually helping. We wanted to have more of a neutral shoe. And we shifted his running trainer that he was using. And that really helped. We also got some body work done. And we gave him some just general rest and recuperation. And so that occurred. And over the course of the really ultimately almost 3 months that he was managing that, we were very, very cautious with his running training. But we just shifted an emphasis towards greater swim and greater bike. So that's what we leveraged. And most of his bike training was on the trainer. Now, this is not news to you. This occurs every single day, every single week with athletes all over the world. The good thing about triathlon is it's swim, bike, and run, wrapped up, swim, bike, run. And so in other words, we could use other modalities to keep him progressing. And so this is not revolutionary from Stuart and his case study, but it was something that was necessary as we went along the example. This is critically important. So in other words, when we think about this component, respond, don't react, it's an inevitable truth that obstacles are going to occur. And so for you, when they do occur, I want you to staple this mindset on your heart. How can I respond constructively to the next challenge that I'm going to face? Because you're going to do that. And you want to think about that third phase. That's when you're in the action. That's the benefit, by the way, of having some coaching, so that you have a partner in your journey with wisdom and with perspective that can give you some good counsel. But if you're self-coach, you have autonomy to make some really logical decisions and ensure that you don't just react. Now, this comes back to the whole flow of the coaching model, because if you haven't started with clear vision and success, and you haven't mapped your focus, it's very, very difficult when things do go astray, when you do have a challenge, when you are set with an obstacle, it's really hard to respond. All that happens here is confusion, frustration, reaction. And so this is really where the model comes into play for you. Very, very important. That's principle number 3. Principle number 4, we've got 2 to go. This is my absolute favorite, reflection. It is the glue that holds the process together. Every single week, in Stuart's case, I think this was the golden key of him able to be successful, because he had chaos going on, huge work demands, the family crisis. He had those niggles and injuries that we were navigating, and he didn't diffuse any of his ambitions and his goals. And so he had an optimization challenge every single week, and it wasn't predictable. That's the thing. And he's no different than many purple patch athletes. Low predictability, high chaos. Welcome to life. And so reflection became a core principle of how he could be successful. What did it look like? Well, it occurred on a week-to-week basis. We leveraged the Sunday special, my favorite tool for driving effectivity. So what did it look like? Well, it occurred on a week-to-week basis. We leveraged the Sunday special to drive effectiveness and also get clarity of priorities. That Sunday special is a wonderful prioritization tool, but it starts with reflection. So every single week, what Stuart did, and this was non-negotiable. In other words, he could not be coached by me if he didn't do this and deliver his thoughts to me every single week. He paused, always of a Sunday, and he looked back at the week prior. Reflection. What went well? What did I get done? Where did I fall short in either my habits, my recovery, my sleep? Did I nail my strength? Did I hit my high intensity, etc.? Some of the components we looked at. What worked? What didn't work? Where do I need to place my emphasis now? And with that information, he could feed into setting up his objectives and focus for the year or the week moving forward. So on a week-to-week basis, reflection was integrated into it. But also, along the journey of his highly ambitious racing schedule, particularly relative to the confines of his life, post-race, we did really healthy reflection. All right, where are we? We've got a really busy life going on. What went well here? What didn't go well? Because not every race was great, by the way. And that's typical, particularly when you've got a more chaotic life and you're trying to be very ambitious and goal-driven in the midst of all that. What went well? What didn't go well? Where do we need to adapt our focus, our priorities, and our emphasis as we move forward and go on this journey? And then biannually, we just did it twice. We wanted to do it quarterly. It only occurred twice. Sometimes that happens. We did a big refresh. All right, halfway through the year, where are we at? And as in the latter part of the year, we started to drive towards IRONMAN, we actually rejiggered the approach pretty healthily because of life demands. So that model that we're talking about throughout this January, we actually almost redid it halfway through the year because we learned what was working and we understood what wasn't working. So reflection was absolutely critical. Now, all of the research in the world supports reflection being critical. Harvard Business Review 2016 absolutely highlights how reflection improves learning and performance because it reinforces lessons and also identifies areas of growth. That's not revolutionary. We understand that in world-class sport. So how does this impact you? Build a reflection habit. Schedule it. Don't leave it to chance. Don't assume it's going to happen. You need to be programmatic about this. That's why I love the Sunday special as a tool. For professional athletes, where we started it with, very busy time-started executives, where I applied it after the pros, and now across the Purple Patch ecosystem. The Sunday special, a simple tool for reflection and then prioritization and planning looking forward. I think it's the biggest unlock. And in our case study today, I've got to be frank, I don't think Stuart could have been successful if we hadn't have had that as a practice, a habit. Really, really important. So what can principle number 5 be? We've talked about responding. We've talked about simplification. We've talked about reflection. What can we have as the principle number 5 to drive not Stuart's success, here's our case study, your success in 2025? Well, we know it's a journey. We know that there are going to be challenges. We know it's never going to roll out the way that we planned it. But you know what principle number 5 is? Build your team. Performance is never a solo endeavor. I don't care what you say. It's true that when you individually, even if it's just about you, and you take a selfish lens, you will get more out of yourself and more predictable and elevated performance levels when you take a team approach to it. It's true. Look, I coached Stuart, but it wasn't just me that helped Stuart. Stuart had a team around him. He brought his family in for support. And we made sure that we coordinated all of the training and all of the habits into the family schedule and calendar. We ensured that they were constituents of the performance journey so that he could remain present and focused on his family, ultimately the most important thing. He also had a strength and conditioning coach to help him, of which I coordinated. He had the community of the Purple Patch athletes, and he leaned into that community. That was really helpful to hold him accountable and to support him on the journey. He had the bravery to actually share his journey and enable people to understand. And you know what? Within our community, there were a whole bunch of people that I'd either navigated similar challenges before or were going through parallel experiences at the same time. And that really helped him with perspective and bravery to do the things that I was asking him to do. Because it is not easy if you have a preconditioned mindset of what it's going to take to be successful, and then suddenly you have to take a completely different path to get there. Team is critical. And so leaning on a support system, dispersing pressure from making it just about you, and instead leveraging other people to help you, and ensuring that you can get balance across personal, professional, and athletic demands is a key catalyst. I'll give you a great example of someone that's done this incredibly well over the arc of the Purple Patch journey. He's an athlete that I've been coaching for almost 15 years, Pasquale Romano, or Pat Romano as I call him. Pat's the CEO, he's a Purple Patch athlete, and he has balanced his career incredibly well. I've got a massive amount of respect for him. He's also integrated great ambitious athletic goals along that career. And he's also ensured that family has stayed a priority. And he's not only gone on and had a wonderful career professionally, and still has an incredibly tight family unit with wonderful relationships with his kids, including now his daughter, who's a Purple Patch athlete and running marathons at the moment. But he has continued to improve as an athlete. And I started coaching Pat in his early 40s. He's now mid to late 50s. And guess what? He's faster. And the way that he's done this is, yes, taking a smart approach, but it's because of a high performance mindset trait, coachability, and his insistence, with my encouragement, on leaning into team. You couldn't get a more team-focused person. And so this is your takeaway. Surround yourself with a supportive team. It doesn't need to be in person, but you do need to feel it. A sense of belonging, a sense of trust, a sense of shared mission, and a high degree of support and accountability. If you can create that through coaching, through friends, through family, through a team or a community, online or remote, like we have at Purple Patch, you are going to amplify your performance. If you go through this journey with it just being you and about you, you're going to struggle. Surround yourself with a supporting team. So I encourage you today, take stock, reflect, whatever causes, who's on your team? Ask yourself. And then also, how can they help you? How can they help you succeed? How can they help you stay brave to your commitments? How can you share with them so that they can ensure that they can hold you accountable? You see, this episode is important because no matter how well you plan, your journey to success is not going to be linear. I've never seen an athlete have amazing breakthroughs when everything just falls into place and goes perfectly. It's always performance within context of their life with a high degree of resilience, commitment, purpose, and adaptability. And this is what we're talking about here, building a toolkit so that you can be adaptable. And by embracing these 5 principles, anchoring yourself in process, simplifying your approach, responding thoughtfully when you are met with challenges, ensuring that you have a practice of reflection and building your team, you're going to equip yourself to navigate the inevitable twists and turns of the season. How did Stuart do? He did pretty well. He got a podium. That's great. He didn't get 4 podiums. That's what he wanted. But he got a podium. And life is a little clearer as we look forward. So he did great. His Ironman, a magical experience. You know the best thing about his Ironman? He said it was like a metronome of energy. He never suffered. He leveraged my great training advice or racing advice for first-time Ironman athletes, which is go out and train all day and make sure that you have fun. Start with a point of reflection and have a little bit of gratitude for being there, and ensure that you don't bypass that last mile, because you'll only have your last mile of an Ironman ever, only once. It's only going to occur once, and so maximize it. 5 principles, high performance 2023. That's how you equip yourself for the journey. We're going to wrap it up next week. It's an important one next week, part 4. Please join me. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to become a part of the team, reach out to us. info@purplepatchfitness.com. I hope that helps. Good luck. Looking forward to it. And I'm enjoying this. Winning at Triathlon 2025. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for joining, and thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed the new format. You can never miss an episode by simply subscribing. Head to the Purple Patch channel of YouTube and you will find it there, and you could subscribe. Of course, I'd like to ask you, if you will subscribe, also share it with your friends, and it's really helpful if you leave a nice positive review in the comments. Now, any questions that you have, let me know. Feel free to add a comment and I will try my best to respond and support you on your performance journey. And in fact, as we commence this video podcast experience, if you have any feedback at all, as mentioned earlier in the show, we would love your help in helping us to improve. Simply email us at info@purplepatchfitness.com or leave it in the comments of the show at the Purple Patch page, and we will get you dialed in. We'd love constructive feedback. We are in a growth mindset, as we like to call it. And so feel free to share with your friends. But as I said, let's build this together. Let's make it something special. It's really fun. We're really trying hard to make it a special experience, and we want to welcome you into the Purple Patch community. With that, I hope you have a great week. Stay healthy, have fun, keep smiling, doing whatever you do. Take care.